Guys, Ash your Raid Shadow Legends. Welcome to the video. Sending some love, some positive vibes your way, especially if you need them out there today. Today's a big one, guys. We are going to go ahead and tier off and rank every mythical champion in the game here in 2025. I got to start by asking, how many mythicals do you own on your account? Who's your favorite? Do you have one? Do you have two?
This is all I got.
Is it Mikage? How many of you guys have your hands so far on Karnage? No one at the time of this recording, at least, has Embrys, but he would be the third, I guess, more accessible compared to your average mythical champion out there who are incredibly hard to get. Anyway, there's a lot that have been added even recently to the game, or a few that have been added at least, so I will include them obviously on the list. Let's just go ahead and jump into the tier list itself. We have S tier, which is God tier, A, top tier, B, solid, C, meh, D, no thanks. Let's just go ahead and go in the order that they're posted here with Alaz. Alaz, the Sun Bearer. This guy is, well, let me take a quick look at their kits before we rank them. But Alaz is absolutely insane. One of my personal favorite mythical champions in the game. He might be my favorite mythical in the game, right? He's just a monster. Notably, his A1 extra hit if they're under shields, great. Ignore shields, fantastic. The Rolling Thunder, one of the hardest hitting defensive nukes, if not the hardest out there in the game. When you get the extra hit, it's just bonkers. It just absolutely annihilates other teams completely in the arena. When you go against an Alaz on the opposite team in the arena, it's like a waiting game. When's he gonna drop the Rolling Thunder, and then you're smoked? Sayonara. Searing Glare is really good as well. It's a 2-turn provoke, great for the decay, head of decay that is. Great for controlling somebody for 2 turns. You also get counterattack on everybody on your team as well as block damage. This is all on a 3-turn cooldown. He has an increased defense mechanism as well on his passive that scales up. On his alternate form, I don't use his alternate form that much, but it's not trash. He has an AoE on this A1 Bolt Quake that actually hits pretty hard. He becomes an HP based champion, and he converts his HP from defense on his base form on his passive, right? So a pretty hard hitting A1. It actually hits harder than his Solar Flare on the A2. A burn on the A2. Can't be resistant on enemies under Stone Skin, but you basically just keep him in his base form anyway in the arena in most situations, not all. Fully restores HP strength and increased resistance, albeit on a 4-turn cooldown. On his alternate form, his base form alone is just so insane. It's nuts. So we're gonna put him in the God tier. Now, I'm going to rank these champions in their tiers as well, so if there's somebody I think is better than Alaz, I'll put them above him or ahead of him in the tier. Next up is Androc. Androc the Glorious. Oh, I love this dude as well. Some people don't like Androc. I don't know why, man. This guy is one of the best champions in the game, in Chimera specifically, because of his passive on his base. Knights of the Wild. Increases champions resist by 10 for H buff on each ally, whatever. But critical hits inflicted by allies fills the turn meter of all allies by 5%, occurs once per skill. There's no cooldown. Just anybody lands a critical hit in a PvE situation. It's just ultimate turn meter fail all the time. It stacks insanely well, right? I mean, if you have 4 other champions alongside of him on the team, I mean, they're all going to hit at least once. You can build your supports with crit rate as well when you play them alongside Androc. So 25% turn meter fill until he gets back to his turn, assuming everybody drops a crit around him, or 20% depending on 4 or 5 Hydra or Chimera. So very, very good there. He brings a great 3 buff on a 3-turn cooldown. Fantastic for 9-piece protection. The increased resistance, the strength, and the continuous heal. An additional continuous heal on allies less than 50% HP. That's maybe 4 buffs potentially on a 3-turn cooldown. He also has a buff extension on his A2 ability and a increased defense on all allies on his A1. Now, a lot of players were disappointed when they went in there or when they actually changed the Enfeeble, right? So it can't work on bosses. It was just broken. It was busted then. But it's a solid A2 with weaken, decrease, resistance, Enfeeble in PvP situations. However, you don't see him a lot in the arena. He also brings on a 3-turn cooldown, block buffs, and buff removal. Great in Hydra in a pinch as well as Chimera. But in Chimera, you really want to try to keep him in his base form as long as you can, unless you're going after trials. He does have that decreased defense on an AoE because it's on all enemies, albeit a 50% chance on his A1. You put it all together, I think you're looking at a really solid mythical champion. I'm going to put him in A tier, but he's not going to be the top of the A tier. To me, he's like B plus, A minus, but where he shines really bright. Okay, next up is going to be a very interesting one. A champion that actually got a buff, a pretty decent multiplier buff recently, and that's Aphidus, the Hive Lord. So this guy, I've always kind of liked him a little bit, even though he really wasn't that great before his buff, right? What does he do? It's all about burns and attack base on his base, and it's all about control and defense on his alternate form. You really can't find maybe another mythical out there who's so different on both of their forms. I guess maybe, Siegfrund. Either way. Decreased defense on his A1, perfect veil on himself. An AoE with increased attack on all allies on a 3-turn cooldown. Pretty nice. You're increasing the duration of all enemy debuffs as well on that ability. You're ignoring some of their defense. If they're not under a burn, 50% if they're under a burn. It can smack, especially after the multipliers. I see him on some record-setting teams as well in areas like Fire Knight. Wouldn't necessarily expect it, but man, some really solid damage there. Another AoE on another 3-turn cooldown. Damage increases against targets under debuffs, instantly activates burns on the same ability, so a lot of burn synergy. He also has damage escalation vis-a-vis stat escalation on his Fresh Searer passive. Each time he places a burn, he decreases the target's defense. Fantastic. For each burn, debuff on the enemy team increases his crit damage, stacks up to 100%. Great for Spider. And whenever an enemy HP burn debuff activates, increases this champion's attack by 5 up to 50%. Resets each round. Great for areas like Hydra. Fantastic Hydra DPS option. And now let's look at the big Beetle on his base form. Oh my God, you're scaring me. You're scaring me, Beetle. I actually love that he turns into a freaking beetle. I don't know what it is, man. Or is he a lobster? No, he has wings. Bruh. I don't know what he is, but he's awesome. All right, so what does he do on this form? Well, he's a great control kit. He's going to increase accuracy on the ally with the highest accuracy for 2 turns and fills their turn meter. A unique A1, but I'll take it. He's got an AoE stun and a continuous heal ×2 on all allies on a 3-turn cooldown. Fantastic. And on the A3, he's going to provoke on a 3-turn cooldown with a strength and an increased defense on all allies, both big versions. There's a lot of support here, a lot of healing here as well, and there's a ton of control. Man, when you look at Mythical, sometimes you'll see bad ratings. I'm not sure. He's kind of mediocre ratings here in the game. I think that Mythical reviews in-game, especially Mythical reviews, tend to be negative because it's all the whales, it's all the Krakens that have most of these champions. So if you pull any of these Mythicals and they have crappy reviews or mediocre reviews, they can probably still help you out. Even some of the real trash ones. It doesn't mean they're the Mythicals that you want to see coming out of a Primal Shard. It doesn't mean that. You're going to be still disappointed, but odds are you can probably get utility from almost every mythical out there in the game. All right, so back to Aphidus. I actually really, really like this dude. I'm going to give him an A, but even under Androc, right? So I'm going to give him an A minus. He's not like one of the elite mythicals out there, but he's really, really solid. He can do so much. You might even make the case, I'm gonna go back on my word. I'm gonna put him right over Androc. What Androc does, he does better in more niche areas, but Aphidus, you can use a burn and control almost everywhere in the damn game. So I'm gonna put him at the top so far of the A tier. Arbias. Ooh. She's one of the most well-rounded mythicals, well-rounded champions in the entire game. Just like most mythicals, she's lightning fast, 115 base speed. She got speed in all battles by 25%. Sign me up. She has a great AoE block active skills with a 40% chance at landing on an AoE On her base form, fantastic for the arena. She's got a great remove all buffs, increased duration of all ally buffs, and a revive on death on all allies, which synergizes with her passive. 30% chance to place a petrification on the attacker whenever an ally's hit while under a revive on death placed by this champion. It's just one of those weird things for me too, that it feels like it procs way more than 30%. Personally, it's nasty control. It's very similar to the Hex with Mithrala's passive, albeit at a 30% instead of a 50%. On the A3, probably the best setup move in the arena for nukers, right? Or for, control champions as well, because she's bringing a whopping Arbiter-esque 30% turn meter boost with the increased attack and the increased accuracy. Definitely the best bomb setup move in the entire game for a champion like, Komidus, who we'll be talking about later on in the video. So what an insanely good base form. And then in our alternate form, it's fantastic as well. She has a decreased turn meter on her A1 with some healing. She has an AoE leech and HP burn, which is great in PvE situations in the arena. Probably better off not using it with all the polymorph going around, but it is situational, of course. But her Roar of the Mistwood is really good. 4-turn cooldown, 2 continuous heals on all allies, a taunt on this champion, as well as a Stone Skin buff for 1 turn. By the way, Stone Skin buffs, very hard to come by, just giving a Stone Skin buff, not from gear, not from Stone Skin sets. And it's one of the only things in the game, other than reviving, that can remove or can counter Embrys, which we'll talk about later on in the video. All right, so Arbias, man, she's doing a ton. I'm putting her in God tier, right below Alaz. I'm sure a lot of players out there would say maybe she's a little bit better than Alaz. I'm sure some players will say maybe she's a little bit worse, but I think that Alaz is probably my favorite defense-based damage dealer in just everything, control, block damage, counterattack in the game. So they're really neck and neck. They're two of the best mythicals out there that you could hope to summon. All right, Ashnar. Oh boy. Well, we started out with a bang, right? Starting this video, one might ask, wait, is everybody just going to be top tier? Ash, come on, bro. Come on. Well, we're going to go ahead and change that right now. So, Ashnar.
That's not fair.
Ashnar Dragon Soul. I hate it because his name is Ash, man. I mean, I feel like I'm obliged. I'm contractually obligated to like this dude. But unfortunately, alas, he's not going to be a top 2-tier champion. He's an HP-based mythical. He changes to a defense-based mythical on his alternate form here. He kind of has a little bit of the same aesthetic on both forms, right? He changes probably the least out of all the mythicals. He's got a triple hit. He's all about burns, instant activation burns, albeit on a 4-turn cooldown, right? He does have turn meter fill associated with burns on his A2. He has a weaken and a burn on a 3-turn cooldown. Again, fills turn meter of all allies, so it's great to get that juicy turn meter fill. And this is why I'm saying he's one of the worst mythicals out there. But I mean, a lot of players can use a kit like this. Massive turn meter fill, HP burns, the big version of weaken. He's got instant activation of burns, and this is the worst. This is the worst of the worst, right? I know I'll catch flack by saying, by being complimentary of this champion, but you compare him to a lot of legendaries, you're like, wow, this guy's a monster. And this is the guy that everybody's going to get disappointed in seeing coming in from a Primal Shard. Each activated HP burn placed by this champion increases his max HP, and HP burns placed on allies heals them instead of damaging them. That's right, he's placing burns on your allies that cannot be blocked and resisted. So he has like a very unorthodox, continuous heal mechanic going on. On his base, his defense-based form, it's more of a nuker, right? Attack one enemy. If the initial target's under a burn, we'll repeat the attack on all enemies. That's going to ignore 20% of the target's defense. And then he has another AoE, potential AoE on the A2, another AoE on the A3, another 3-turn cooldown. Before attacking, he's going to bring his own increased defense that escalates his damage, and an increased crit damage, and then a provoke on targets under a burn. And the target's a boss under a burn. It's a 2-turn provoke, and it cannot hit on a weak hit when hitting enemies under an HP burn. Pretty good ability, right? These damage dealing abilities deal decent damage for a defense-based champion. I think they do have a godlike rating in hellhades.com, but overall, he's really solid, and I love the weak hit thing as well, but everything's about burns. Now, there is a little bit extra damage escalation vis-a-vis this passive. All this champion skills will ignore 15% of the enemy's defense if they're under a burn. I would love to see a little bit more damage out of his alternate form, or I would love to see an extra turn mechanic, right? These extra turn mechanics are very prevalent, especially when we get to a bunch of the latter half mythicals. He doesn't have one, and I think it hurts him a little bit. Most mythicals with kits like this have an extra turn or just something special and unique in addition than Ashnar does. Because of all that, I'm going to put him in meh, and I feel like I'm being kind there. But like I said, he does bring quite a bit to the table. All right, next up is going to be a champion who just got a buff, in Frolni, the Mechanist. So, he's an interesting champion. Opinions are kind of divided. First of all, when they buffed him, all they did was buff his damage. Nothing else. Didn't change anything about this dude's kit. His base form is really cool. It all revolves around his passive, though, right? If you want to know anything about this champion, know about his passive. This champion's crit damage is increased by 1% for every 1,000 HP they have. Very easy to scale that. He has a 22k base HP. Increases champion's max HP by 20%, meh. Speed by 20, well, not meh. I take it back. That's going to be a lot of extra damage. Increases champion's max HP by 20% up to 100%, and speed 20 up to 100 when this champion kills an enemy, resets each round. This dude, if you see a Sun Wukong, right, you're going to get that massive escalation in both his damage, vis-a-vis his max HP, and his speed. And then he becomes an absolute monster. The downside is, I don't know, a champion like UDK. It's such a hard counter to a guy like this, and you can't do much, especially if he's under Stone Skin, right? You weak hit here, you're stealing 2 buffs from a single enemy, can't be resisted. You weak hit, it's not going to happen, right? If the attack is critical, repeats the attack once. So you can potentially get a steal buffs, 4 buffs from a target enemy on this A2. It's a nice ability. There's a lot of ways around it with Force Affinity, especially UDK, again, in the arena. The Exterminate the Weak attacks all enemies, damaging this skill increased by 30%. This champion's max HP is higher than each target's max HP. Again, it deals pretty solid damage, but with the escalation, it can nuke for days. Can be some serious damage. So all in all, I like the buff, but he's still very situational. Frankly, he's not the champion that I ever want to see. I don't have him, and I don't really want him, you know?
Always wanted to be wanted.
Oh, I hate to talk a lot of smack, but he's a bit more situational than a lot of these other champions. Now, that being said, his alternate form, which you haven't even gotten to yet, it changes to a defense-based form. He's got an AoE with a heal, balance HP of all allies. It can be a complete heal, very nice on a 3-turn cooldown. And then he brings ally protection as well. He's not doing any damage, really, on this alternate form compared to his base. He looks cool, though. So, all in all, even after the buff, I wish they went a little bit more aggressive. I applaud them that going in there and touching up, especially mythicals, because again, you don't want to pull a mythical and get like some super crap champion that you'll never use. But I'm actually going to put him in the solid, probably the lower half of the solid B. But before the buff, I mean, he was in solid meh territory to me. Probably maybe even in no thanks. The buff was nice to get that extra damage out of him. It makes him very viable, but albeit a bit situational in my opinion. Next we have the Cock. Probably this will be the champion that I get the most amount of flack for on the list. It's Galleus Bloodcrest. So this is the big chicken, right? Rooster? Chicken? I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't grow up in a farm. I'm a city child. But there we have the electric blue chicken rooster dude. Rooster, right? Why
do you care?
Anyway, what does this dude do? I know whenever I say stupid crap like this in my videos, most of the comments end up being about like, is he a chicken or a rooster, you know? Anyway, he goes on his base form, excuse me. Let's start here. He's got a decreased speed on his A1. He's got an AoE with a provoke on his A2. If it's a boss, it's a 2-turn provoke. Great for Hydra control if you're lacking a good provoker, right? Unkillable on this champion, a counterattack on him as well, which leads to more decreased speed, which is really nice. On his A3, it's a fully destroyed max HP on a 3-turn cooldown with a revive on death and increased defense. Not a broken ability, but it's all right, right? reflects 50% of the damage the champion receives back to the attacker. If it's a boss, reflects 100% of the damage the champion receives and heals this champion as well. It gives him good survivability, but it's not a ton of damage because he's actually pretty tanky. He's a defense-based champion, thus, he's actually not receiving a ton of damage, right? Ends up being like, 20,000 damage or whatever, right? Which against a boss isn't that much. So it's not super significant, at least in PvE, which is where this dude really shines. You don't see him ever in PvP unless you're talking about progression. So the good thing is he's got the provoke, right? Not bad. And that's it. Decreased speed with counterattack. Not a lot of damage, unfortunately. On his alternate form, he becomes a very compelling wave clearer. Do we want a mythical champion to be a wave clearer? Certainly not, but he is a great one. Extra hit on his A1, great, whatever. In AoE, before attacking, places a decreased defense for 2 turns. Increases for each enemy under the decreased defense damage. He's also stealing 20% turn meter from each enemy. This is why I said he's elite wave clearer. He goes in, then he gets the extra turn against waves. He kills them all, basically, and goes in with another decently strong AoE on his A3. AoE damage increases by 15% for each buff on each target. Decreases the duration of all enemy buffs by 2 turns. That's polymorph proof, but you don't see him in the arena. It's 2 pretty hard-hitting defensive-based AoE attacks with the decreased defense. Enemies under decreased defense cannot place these C debuffs on this champion. Resets the cooldown of the Sundered Sky, which is the A2 ability, when an enemy under decreased defense is killed by the skill. So now, kind of like old school Queen Ava, you can just go in and just use Sundered Sky, get your turn meter, reset the cooldown, Sundered Sky, get your turn meter, reset this cooldown, and you can just chain this ability again and again and again and again. Is it awesome? Yes. Is it an elite wave clear in Centranos and, Doom Tower? Yes. Is that the best thing about this mythical champion other than 2-turn provoke? Yes. So it's a mixed bag with this dude. Really good AoE decreased defense champion, really decent damage, very tanky, but man, that's it. That's it from a mythical champion. So as much as I was actually surprised by that alternate form, it's almost like they need the provoke and the decreased defense on the same side of his kit, right? Either form. That way you can actually lend and add more versatility without having to keep losing turns and switching back and, removing your buffs and stuff like that. So I'm going to give him I hate to give him a no thanks, but honestly, again, a wave clear for the most part, I'm going to give him a no thanks. I wish, and I think they will actually buff this rooster, and I think he's going to be really good after they do. All right, next is Gharol Bloodmaul. So Gharol, certainly a lot better than Galleus. Gharol Bloodmaul is a beast. Her base form, a lot of people don't use it that much. It's good for progression. She's got a provoke on an AoE, albeit a 4-turn cooldown. She's got a removal of block buffs and an ally protection and a shield. Okay. Whatever, right? She does have a decrease the duration of all buffs on the attacker every time she's hit. With a heal, not bad on the base form. But when we talk about Gharol, it's all about the alternate form, right? You can use her in the arena, against a lockout champion. You can switch forms and just kill them all, right, on the alternate form. But her claim to fame is these longer battles, such as Hydra Clan Boss, where anytime somebody else attacks, because of her Crimson Haze passive, whenever an ally attacks, this champion has a 25% chance to team up with them and join their attack. Damage increases as this champion's HP decreases 1% for every 1% HP lost. So it's a lot of damage. Her Magma Slam also has a 20% chance to repeat the attack on her A1. So you can join in when it's not even her turn, and then just smack. I've seen her use this ability like 3 or 4 times, 5 times maybe in a row. It's just insane. It's an AoE and it deals really nice damage. Think of like a Cupidus A1, but even harder hitting with the chance of repeating the attack. That's what makes her so great. So if you're lucky enough to have a Gharol, you should not be afraid to build her maybe a little bit on the slower side, because she's going to use a lot of her attacks out of turn from her passive and just with extra hits on her A1. Thus, she is a champion that I would consider putting in attack percentage boots to really try to min-max her damage per hit. She has the Calamitus. Whoa, whoa, whoa. On her A2, she has the Calamitus Maul. Attacks all enemies, damage increases by this skill, but 10% for each buff on this champion. Ignores 30% of the target's defense. This one hits even harder, obviously, than her A1 ability. So really good damage dealer. A bit one-dimensional, but a really good damage dealer nonetheless. I'm gonna put her in, I guess, low A tier, just because she's so good. But again, she's a little bit limited to waves and to Hydra and to Chimera. I guess you could use her in other areas too. Whatever. A tier is still good though. Gizmak. Man, I'm going long on this video, huh? I'm just talking a lot about these champions. Hope you guys don't mind. You know what I'll do is I will try to timestamp every mythical. So if you only have like one or two, you could just go to wherever you got. Gizmak the Terrible. Gizmak. One of the fastest champions in the game. Again, 115 base speed. Let's start by talking about his A3. Let me at him. Increase crit damage, increase crit rate, increase speed on all allies. 3 turns with the extra turn. Oof. This is the type of champion that when you talk about him, you almost talk about the flow. Like he gets in a flow state where he takes all these turns back to back to back to back. So let's do it that way, right? First of all, passive real quickly. At the start of each round, places a burn on all enemies for 2 turns. It cannot be resisted if this champion's crit rate is 100% or higher. At the start of his turn, has a 50% chance of placing a burn on all enemies. Again, cannot be resisted. He's going to have a 100% crit rate easily because he's a nuker anyway on his alternate form. So you build him with a 100% crit rate and nothing can be resisted. Don't need accuracy at all in his kit. So we start the round and we're going to use Spark of Anger. We're putting a burn as a passive. Going to put a burn on everybody, can't be resisted. Nothing you can do about it. Then we're going to use his Let Me At Him. We're going to get all these buffs. Then we're going to get another extra turn. Now, we're not going to use the A2, but we could if we wanted to. It's increase the duration, then instantly activate burns, right? It decreased speed as well. Can't be resisted, by the way. But we're not going to use the A2. After this extra turn, we're going to go to his alternate form, where he becomes a little witch doctor dude. Or excuse me, he goes from a little witch doctor to being a big tank dude. We're going to go to the Kaboom, ability. This is an AoE attack before attacking, places a decreased defense that cannot be resisted if they're under a burn. Guess what? We just applied the burn vis-a-vis his passive. An extra hit on enemies under burn. That's probably going to kill him. Grants an extra turn if you kill an enemy. So far, we've buffed everybody. We've put in a burn on everybody. We've switched to his alternate form. We've AoE'd. We place a decreased defense. We've killed some of them. And then we get another extra turn, which goes into Ungodly Fury. 3-turn cooldown, Pain Link on a target for 2 turns, cannot be removed, resisted, or blocked. When calculating the damage, 75% of the attacker's multiplier is reflected back on the Pain Link debuff. Ignore 100% of the target's defense. Also has a taunt on this champion, unkillable on this champion, ally protect on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. This is all within 1 turn, feasibly. That's busted. That's busted. He does so much. Probably the most beautiful synergy in terms of his base to his alternate form out of any mythical out there in the game. Anywhere you need a burner, a decreased defense, a support champion, just an overall buffer, a killer, he's got you covered. Gizmak the Terrible is in the A tier. It's hard to choose between, or S tier, excuse me. It's really difficult to choose between these 3 champions order, but I think I'll leave him there for now. Lazarius. Oh man, things get busted here, man. Things just keep going, right? Lazarius. This dude is insane. He does so much. Again, 115 base speed. He has speed in all battles by 25%. Same aura as Arbias does. He's got a shield on the A1. On the A2, on his base form, he is a reviver. He's a buff, block buff champion, a buff reducer champion. He's a buffer as well. He's all about support, and he does a fantastic job of supporting with his base form. On his alternate form, it's all about damage and control. He's a really busted kit when you put it all together. In AoE, before attacking, block debuffs on all allies for 2 turns. Also, decreases the duration of all buffs on enemies by 2 turns. After attacking, plays a block buffs on all enemies for 2 turns. So block debuffs on allies, a decreased duration of enemy buffs, and then block buffs. Wow, signed, sealed, delivered. He's got it all in the A2. And then the Rift's Gaze. This is a 3-turn cooldown when booked. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 20%, decrease the turn meter of all enemies by 20%, increase attack and strengthen on all allies. Being that he's so fast with his speed aura, it can be a great setup move for the rest of your team, for the rest of your nukers, and you can keep him in base form. Now, I mentioned a revive. Here it is, Reality Shift. At the end of this champion's turn, we'll revive an ally with 50% HP, 50% turn meter, and a perfect veil for 2 turns. All he's got to do is take a turn. Passive effect at the start of this champion's turn plays a perfect veil and increased accuracy on him for 2 turns. Also receive 3% less damage for every 750 attack that they have. Man, this is just his base form. On his damage dealing form, he's got this nifty A2, where before attacking removes all debuffs from this champion, a self-cleanse, increase attacker's damage by 15% for each debuff removed. If no debuffs removed, it increases attacker's damage by 15% for each ally alive. He's ignoring shield and increased defense on an AoE. On the Flame Vulcan, it's ignoring ally protection on a 2-time hitter, a strengthen, ignoring shield, as well as 30% of the target's defense, and then before attacking, he's stealing half of their turn meter that cannot be resisted. Oh my word. I'm not done yet. I want to go to, at the start of this champion's turn, place an increased attack, increased crit damage on himself. Active effect, increase the cooldown of all enemy skills by 2 turns whenever he kills an enemy. Oh my word. Oh my word. I mean, he's doing so much. He's got a built-in Alaz on his passive. You know, he's got so much control, so much damage, so much buffs, the revive, the speed, everything in this champion. He's really, truly insane.
Michael Ruselet.
Oh my God, I can't believe it.
We're going to go ahead and put him in S tier. I don't know. I'm going to review the order here of the S tier in a little bit, but for now, let's just keep it at that. Carnage time. Well, you guys know, if you're a loyal viewer here, watching all my content, that I'm a massive fan of Carnage, the Anarch. He is the champion that we get from Centranos, and he is so unique. He's very, very good. He's very complex compared to a lot of other mythicals in the game as well. He's removing a random buff from the target. Very good. Whenever an enemy hits this champion or an ally, he's counterattacking, so he's constantly removing buffs from enemies. Very, very good. You can have a chance of even removing Stone Skin on this A1. On his Devilish Accord, 2-time hitter before attacking swaps HP with the enemy, steals all their buffs, transfers all debuffs from this champion to the target, seals them for 2 turns, cannot be removed, cannot be resisted or blocked if they have 50% HP or less. All of his damage scales on accuracy as well. You want to build him with a lot of accuracy, get an increased accuracy buff on him. It does make quite a difference to his overall damage. Some players even go for Eagle Eye Mastery for extra damage over Helm Smasher. A triple hitter on his Trinity of Pain. This is going to be first hit, plays a block passive skills, cannot be removed. Second hit, block active skills, cannot be removed. Third hit, steals their entire turn meter. So we open up with the A3, we totally neutralize the opponent. We steal all their turn meter. Hopefully we go again. We swap HP with somebody else, and we seal them, and we steal all their buffs. It's great control, but check out this. His passive. Each hit this champion deals from skills a 50% chance to apply a debuff spread, taking a random debuff from the target, placing them on all enemies. Whenever he kills an enemy, 100% chance of applying a debuff spread, taking all their debuffs, placing them on all enemies, and this effect cannot be resisted. So all of those counterattacks with the A1, all of those attacks, everything we talked about has a 50% chance of spreading their debuffs, right? And he has some of the best debuffs in the game in these block passive and active skills. He also has speed and arena battles by 33%, the best speed arena battle aura in the game. And then he has nukes for days on his base form. He has an AoE nuke ignoring shields. He also has a AoE nuke ×2 hitter. If the target is killed by the skill under 3 or more debuffs, plays a block revive on them. Also heals him on this ability. He has ignore 10% defense for each debuff they're under on his passive. So really can get some escalating damage, all around debuffs, which he does a hell of a job spreading on his base form. Put it all together, you get a great, annoying disruptor, nuker, control-y champion. I'm going to put him in A tier. I'm going to put him right over there for now. All right, Komidus, the ultimate bomb champion. Boy, do I want this dude. He is busted. He's busted. So he's a support on his base form. He does so much, this guy. So much. He's known for one thing, his bomb activation, but he does so much. He's got Stealing Turn Meter on his A1. He's got an AoE, remove all buffs from all enemies, and place a block active skills for 2 turns. Also steals turn meter for each enemy under a block active skills. This is low-key one of the best control abilities out there in the game. Neutralize other mythicals, remove all their buffs, block their active skills, and steal their turn meter. Yikes. A Thief of Joy attacks one enemy, put all their skills on cooldown, and steal their turn meter. So now he's stealing more. You can open up with a Thief of Joy, go into the Agony Overwhelming A2, and you're still stealing turn meter. Just nasty stuff here. He's a shield and HP and death prevention on his passive. And AoE, this is what he's known for here. AoE, 2 bombs on all enemies for 2 turns. Instantly detonates all bombs on all enemies with Stone Skin and or enemies whose HP is less than this champion's. He's got a boatload of HP, almost 24k base. It's easy to do. And then to add insult and injury to injury, even if there's anybody left alive, he's placing a stun on all enemies who had their bombs detonated by this skill. Stunning them, just in case. He's also got a heal, he's got a weaken, and an extra turn. So before you kill him, you can fry him with the heal, as well as a weaken on all enemies. But you got to be careful, polymorph. Don't risk it. And then he has a 100% chance to reflect bombs placed by this champion back to the attacker or on this champion. Good for bombable situations as well. Oh my god, he's got accuracy in all battles by 80. Man, Komidus is just like next level, the best bomber in the game by far. And he's got all that juicy control. He's god tier. He's god tier. All right, we're going to go ahead and go take a look at Lady Mikage. You guys know how much I love Lady Mikage. It's not going to be a surprise where I rank her. I think she's one of the best champions in the game. Why do I say that? Because I have almost every champion in the game, and I use Lady Mikage arguably more than any other champion in the game, period. I think that's testament to her utility. One of the best, if not the best, ally attackers in the game with an increased attack, increased crit damage on the ally attack. She's got an AoE, one of the best buff debuff manipulation, not one of, the best buff debuff manipulators in the game. She does everything in 1-3 turn cooldown. It decreases the duration of all enemy buffs, all ally debuffs, increase the duration of all enemy debuffs, all ally buffs. And then she has a mini ally attack with Shadowkin faction allies on her A1. So powerful when paired with like a ninja or a Toshiro or any DPS that you have in Shadowkin that you pair with her, a Boro and Hydra. I didn't even talk about her passives. Excuse me. Real quick. Change back. There we go. At the start of the champion's turn, removes all debuffs from the ally with the highest attack. The Will of the Mikage. Man, like what an underrated freaking passive that is. Just a cleanse. No big deal. Just a cleanse on our nuker who needs it the most. On her alternate form, the spider form, an AoE stun, decreased turn meter of all enemies by 30%. It's a menace in the arena. She also has buff removal, increased accuracy on a 4-turn cooldown on her Doom of Yakai ability. And then at the start of this champion's turn, decrease the turn meter of the enemy with the highest attack by 15%. So now she's neutralizing the nuker on the other team. She has accuracy in all battles by 80 as well. Man, oh man, Mikage. Amazing control. Buff removal, great ally attack, amazing manipulator. I absolutely love Mikage, and I think she's absolutely god tier. And I'm moving her on up. This is where I hit a little bit of I'm sure a lot of players out there, there's something psychologically by having a free champion. I feel like people are like, not that I know she's hard to get, but you know what I'm saying. I feel like we tend to kind of discount, right? And I put her all the way up there. I know a lot of people will have a problem with that. But I'm just telling you, I have all of these champions except for Komidus, and I use her the most. I'm just saying. I don't think she's going to be the highest when all's said and done, but right now she's going to be the highest. Just because I think she's just Just a beautiful kit. Just a beautiful kit.
All right, stop drooling.
All right, who's up next? We have Mezomel. Alrighty, so Mezomel is pretty interesting. First of all, she's got a self-buff ability with an extra turn. It's all selfish, but it's nice to have, right? On her A2, Scarlet Crescent. Very unique ability, right? It not only ignores Stone Skin, but it also blocks Revive. Thus, when Mezomel is on the battlefield in PvP, she was always a massive threat. If you have a Harima or an Alaz or a strong Force Affinity team, she can be an absolute god tier nuker with this ability. The downside is it doesn't hit that hard, right? It hits decent, but not that hard. You can also get rid of Sun Wukong nice and easy with her. He'll never come back. It's a block revive, and that's an easy kill, even with UDK on the team, because it's a 2-time hitter, right? So, really nasty ability. On her other form, she has an AoE True Fear for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, very good. And then an AoE on her A1, which won't trigger counterattacks. Extra hit if they're under a True Fear. Great control, great damage. Just nice damage on her her alternate form here. She increases her attack and crit damage by 20% when she's in this alternate form as well. She has very, very high base attack, 1652. Not the highest in the game, but not bad. So it scales well. That being said, she is fairly one-dimensional. In the arena, she's great. She's really solid, I should say, right? When you're going against those type of champions. We're going against a super tanky team, just not quite enough usually. So I would say situationally great. In areas like Hydra, her damage is very good, but not quite enough to be value over replacement to me than some of the better legendary AoE damage dealers on her base form. So for that reason, she's not my absolute favorite mythical, but she's really fun. I'm going to put her in the solid category right over Frolni. All right, Nice is going to be next. Nice. All right, so I don't have Nice, but he is really, really good. He's an attack-based mythical champion. He looks really cool. He gets turned into a bird on his alternate form. Turns into a is he even a bird? Half man, half bird, I guess. So what does he do? What makes him one of my most wanted mythicals out there in the game? He's a hard-hitting A1, scales off HP and attack. Kind of interesting there on his abilities for an attack-based form, but it's definitely notable. He won't trigger counterattacks and ignore shields on his A2, that's Black Feather Barrage. Also steals turn meter from each enemy. Can't be resisted by enemies with more than 50% turn meter. So usually you open up with this move and you get your turn back. You get enough turn meter back so you can take another turn. On his Thief's Omen, it's double damage against bosses. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but it does block revive if the target's killed by this skill, which is very good, obviously. Block revive abilities are few and far between in this game, especially hard-hitting ones, and he has that on his A3. The cool thing, though, is 5% damage for each 10% HP the target has lost. Cool, but prevents this champion's death, keeps them alive on 1 HP when hit with a fatal hit, and transforms them into his alternate form where he has annoying Feather Shield ability. This is going to remove all debuffs, place a number of continuous heals equal to the number of debuffs removed on himself, place a counterattack and a block damage for 2 turns that cannot be removed, stolen, or transferred. Thus, when he's about to die, he transfers, uses his A3, and then he's alive for a long time, right? Also revives a random ally with 50% HP and 50% turn meter each time this champion kills an enemy. So now he is also a reviver off of that passive. I've seen teams make a comeback with Nice on the squad where he was the only one left with 1 HP with a 2-turn protected block damage. Increases champion's HP, defense, speed, resist, and accuracy by 15% for every dead ally, including bosses and their minions in battle. Stacks up to 100%. Really strong because when he transfers, he's sitting with, usually he's the last one left or one of the last ones left, right? In a lot of situations, at least. He has an AoE with a Provoke. Cannot be resisted if this champion has more than 75% HP. If this champion has 50% HP or less, plays a stun on them instead. Cannot be resisted. So he has stun and or Provoke on his A2 on a 3-turn cooldown. Great control, great damage, great survivability. Really cool champion. I'm going to put him in the God tier. All right, we have Nell Right next door, we have Nell. Nell Black Teeth is a very interesting champion. Some people love her, some people hate her. Most people hate her. You can see by the reviews. What do you think of her kit? She's a support champion. She's tanky-ish, pretty fast. She's stealing turn meter on her A1 with a true fear. Very nice. She's a steal all buffs from all enemies. That's a good sentence to get me intrigued as a first line in somebody's kit. Steal all buffs from all enemies. Cool, sign me up. Decreases target's turn meter by 10%. Decrease each target's turn meter by additional 5% for each debuff on them. Also instantly activates all poison debuffs on all enemies. And then places a sleep debuff on all enemies without poisons. So, man, it's kind of like Abyssal Gaze from Kymar, only different, I guess, right? Where she's going in, she's stealing all buffs instead of removing all buffs. And then she's placing the sleep on enemies without poison, or she's instantly activating and decreasing turn meter all at the same time. On her Sickle of Corruption, or A3, it's a decreased defense and weaken ability with a turn meter fill of 20% on a 3-turn cooldown. So again, she becomes, you know, probably the 6th or 7th champion to have an AoE decreased defense and weaken on the same ability on a 3-turn cooldown. Yencheshka, Grail Bearer,
Don't bother.
Lydia, Dracomorph, Venus, Nell, Bellinor. I know I'm missing one. Anyway, I digress. Check out this Black Teeth buffet. Whenever an enemy receives a buff, is healed, or has their turn meter increase, places a poison on that enemy for 2 turns, will ignore block debuffs buffs, increase the champion's turn meter by 5% for each poison debuff placed. There's no cooldown. It can just go till infinity, or 10 debuffs, and then she can go and activate them, right? And this happens a lot. She is a polymorph, like, she's going to get polymorphed all over the place. So it's tough to play her. You're going to be rocking a lot of feral gear on her, right? In the arena. But, man, that's some really cool synergy. On her, where am I going here? On her alternate form, if I can get there, what does she do? A quad hitter on her A1, right? On her A2, it's a 2-time hitter. If a target's killed, it instantly activates her A3. Her A3 is an AoE with True Fear for 2 turns. Cannot be blocked or resisted by enemies with 50% HP or less. Whenever this champion kills an enemy, grants an extra turn. Each debuff placed by this champion in either form increases her attack, her HP, and her defense by 2% up to 50%, and speed by 2 up to 50 while in their alternate form, which is really freaky looking. Man, I'll be real with you guys. I don't have her. I've only heard bad things about her. But her kit, it reads really well. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Let me know if you agree or disagree with me. She's tough to rank, as again, I'm probably least acquainted with her and the new guy. But I'm gonna go ahead and put her at, I'm gonna put her at the bottom of A tier. And again, I know people will take issue with that, but her kit looks really good to me. Not PvP good. And again, a lot of people ranking these champions in the end game are PvP players. So maybe that's why the discount is there. But a poison activator with the decreased defense, the weaken, and everything else, man, it's got me pretty intrigued. Krixia time. My first mythical, and boy, what a lucky, great first mythical to get on your account. She's got a lockout with a buff removal on the A3 ability. She's got a decreased resistance, turn meter decrease, and a block buffs on the A2. She's got a increased duration of all debuffs on the target by 1 turn on each hit on her A1. Very good. But check out this Shadow Vigil passive. She's immune to stun, aka Armans. Increases champion's accuracy by 1 for every 2 resistance they have. Gives you a little bit of incentivization to build her with a little bit of resistance as well. So really solid, right? Especially the A3, obviously. You want her to be super, super fast, go first in the arena, remove their buffs, put them on cooldown. The only downside of this ability, as opposed to a Yameko, for example, is she does have a chance to be sheeped when removing the buffs from all enemies. And that can happen before she puts everybody's cooldowns, so that could be a downside to her. Not a lot bad to say about Krixia, but that's one of them. On her alternate form, it's the perfect inverse of everything on her base form. So on her A1, chance of decreasing the duration of all debuffs on a random ally by 1 turn instead of enemy. Her A2, Reign of Damnation, is the opposite of her A2 on her base form. Instead, it's an AoE attack with block debuffs instead of block buffs, and an increased resistance instead of a decreased resistance. And then we get a 20% turn meter fill instead of a 20% turn meter depletion on the enemies. And then her Night Purge is the opposite of her Deathly Apparition, which is a cleanse, decrease the cooldown of all ally skills except this champion by 3 turns, right? So beautiful. So we have a full cleanse along with the reset move. Queen of the Dark, she's immune to sleep, and she increases her speed by 1 for every 10 resistance they have, stacks up to 50. So again, you're incentivized to build her with some resistance. Very, very interesting lockout, buffer, cleanser, a lot in one. Really, really a solid champion. I'm going to put her in A tier. She's one of my faves. You guys probably know that. I'm going to put her right over there. All right, next up is Siegfrund. Man, they changed the game when they buffed this dude. For my money, he's the best attack-based champion in the entire game, bar none. He's got a busted A2 ability. It hits very hard. Each critical hit fills his champion's turn meter by 25%, so 100% turn meter fill in the arena, for example, and just basically makes him go next in wave content. This guy wave kills. Wave evaporates even better than Seer does, depending on gear and situations, obviously. Resets the cooldown of the A3 if you kill an enemy. Resets the cooldown of all of his skills if you attack or kill 2 or more enemies. Thus, when you use this to kill a wave, you can just come back in and use it right over again. Rage of Nephilim, the hardest hitting attack-based ability in the game. Attacks one enemy, ignores 50% of the target's defense, will attack all remaining enemies with any surplus damage if the initial target is killed. Fully heals his champion if the initial target is killed. What more can I tell you? It's insanely hitting for millions of damage, even in PvE against, level 320 mobs or whatever. It's just busted. And then he has his alternate form. Well, he has a fatal damage block, which allows you to build him in Feral. You don't have to build him in Stone Skin, because he can prevent his death, right? Really, really solid there as well. You can, of course, build him in Stone Skin, but you don't have to. If he's about to die, or he's the last enemy left alive, which is easy to do because he has that preemptive fatal hit mechanic, right? He switches over to this badass, fully winged, flaming version of Siegfrund here, and he can revive everybody with block damage for 2 turns. That gives you plenty of time to heal them up with this A2. It's going to cleanse them. It's going to heal them. It's going to put a block debuffs on them. He has like a decently hard-hitting AoE on his attack on his A1 with another heal based on the damage inflicted. That is a busted kit. He is such a threat, such a tremendous champion in the game. I'm going to put him at, I don't know.
Seriously, this is my spot.
I don't know. Right now, I'm going to say he's the best. I'm going to say he's the best. Just to get a champion that is the best nuker in the game, that has an entire other revive, cleanse, heal, blah, 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 with the preemptive death, it's next level. You see him on all the fastest teams in every dungeon. You see him, all the top players are using it if they have him in the arena. He's just, for a nuker, he's being used as much, if not more, than like a Mikage, right? He's way harder to get, obviously, but man, if you can get this dude, congratulations, you've won the game. All right, next up is going to be Starsage Galathir. A lot of people are annoyed by Starsage Galathir. He's that good, right? One of the fastest champions in the game, super tanky, AoE with filled turn meter of all allies on his A1, very solid, right? Has a great cleanse, one of the best in the game. It's a cleanse, it's a heal, it's a turn meter fill, and a block debuffs all on a 3-turn cooldown, right? Yeah, what more do you want? What more do you want there? He has a revive, very, very good revive, 50% HP, 50% turn meter with a perfect veil, right? And then he has a 5% less damage for every 100 resists, so damage mitigation. And then preemptive death as well. Preventive death, and then equalizes his HP. Fantastic, right, on his passive. And then he becomes one of the best control champions on his alternate form in the game. He has the opposite of his A1, decrease the turn meter of all enemies by 10% on his AoE on the A1 ability. He's got remove all buffs from all enemies, block active skills for 2 turns, won't trigger counterattacks, why not? Great control ability. So annoying and effective in the arena. you're removing buffs, so you have block debuffs or anything like that, it's going to be removed. He is susceptible to polymorph, but he does have a lot of incentivization to build him with a resist. So unless you're going against 6-star, he can resist it, and often in a lot of scenarios. Excuse me. He also has an increased accuracy on all allies, with a decreased resist on all enemies, with a stun on all enemies. A great controllability. I mean, increased accuracy, decreased resist. They're not going to be resisting anything after that. Again, sheep susceptible for sure, but man, that's about the only thing you can say negative about this dude. Increases champions' accuracy equals 75% of their resist when placing debuffs or activating instant effects. So again, this is going to allow you to build him with a lot of resist. That way, hopefully preventing some of those sheeps. If an enemy's accuracy is higher than this champion's resist, has a 50% chance of transferring any fear, true fear, freeze, provoke, blah, 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 back to the enemy when placed on this champion. A lot of people forget about that passive as well. And of course, resist in all battles. So I think he is the best mythical in the game. Starsage Galathir. I apologize for having so many S tiers. I feel like, but who can you argue with here, right? Even the ranking, I could probably have Laz up a spot or two, but I mean, they're all just insanely good, right? Insanely good. Even maybe Komidus I'll put in top of A tier instead, because the one thing about him is maybe a little bit more niche compared to all of these champions, right? Just try to flesh out the list a little bit, right? I don't know. Am I crazy? All right, who is next? The Calamitus. Well, I can promise we won't be using these tiers on Calamitus. Hey, shout out to King Arthur Legends Rise.
You are a traitor.
All right, here we go. The Calamitus. I pulled this dude, and I'll be real with you guys. I'm going to be totally real. I'm going to walk you through my thought process. I'm like, man, everybody says he's the worst mythical in the game, right? Everybody says he's the worst. First of all, when you pull the worst of anything, worst void legendary, not anything, but you pull the worst void legendary, you pull the worst mythical in the game, you should kind of be low-key excited, because they should be first in line to get a buff, right? So it's better than one of these like mid tiers, I feel like, in some situations. Anyway, I looked at these rankings and I looked at his kit. Okay, a 2-time hitter, a 4-time hitter with a bunch of good debuffs, and then AoE, always critical. Okay, all right, it's a 4-turn cooldown. I wasn't super overwhelmed on his base form. Then I looked at his alternate form. In AoE, before attacking, cleanses himself. Damage increases for Hex. 3-turn cooldown. A 4-turn cooldown, placing Hex in a decreased defense, ignoring Poison Cloud, Life Barrier, Ally Protect. I was like, all right, if he can smack, maybe I can get some utility out of this alternate form. The biggest issue with him isn't the damage, in my opinion. His damage isn't insane, but it's not bad. It's not awful, I should say. For a mythical, it feels lackluster, though. But the biggest issue is this is ridiculous to have on a 4-turn cooldown. He's a mythical champion. Give him a damn Hex and a decreased defense on a 3-turn. I don't care, man. That's just crazy. So that alone, it's just like, that's the biggest bummer of his entire kit. Because if it was on a 3-turn cooldown, at least a lot of players who pull him, they wouldn't be excited, don't get me wrong, but at least they could use him as a reliable decreased defense and a Hex champion in Hydra. But that's it. That's this dude's kit. He looks really cool, but man, he feels like a pretty mediocre legendary, honestly. You know? Maybe even worse than that because of the 4-turn cooldown. I'm putting him in the no thanks, and I'm putting him as the worst mythical in the game. Bummer. Real bummer. And I have him.
My sincere condolences.
It's just, I think he's worse than the rooster. Worse than the cock. All right, Toshiro. Toshiro the Bloodied. Oof. I said that Siegfrund was the best attack-based nuker in the game. Toshiro might give him a run for his money in some situations, some areas, because he has damage escalation on his A2 ability, on the Sanguine Darts, right? So, like, against Hydra, against, in PvE situations, against bosses, let me put it that way, Toshiro will take the cake over Siegfrund for damage, right? And against most bosses, Chimera, for example, right? Longer battles is what I'm trying to say. Each hit increases his champion's attack and HP by 5% while his base form up to 100%, right? Very, very strong. If the target's under a leech, his champion's HP and attack are increased by 10% instead. Really bonkers, given how much damage he deals. He has an AoE decreased defense and a leech on a 3-turn cooldown. See, it is possible. It is possible. Extra hit on enemies under 2 or more debuffs. Bloody Typhoon, Sanguine Darts, and his A1 Quick Draw are some of the hardest hitting attack-based abilities inside the entire game of Raid Shadow Legends. This ability, Quick Draw, 50% chance of attacking another enemy if they're under a leech debuff. Perfect Veil on himself as well. This pair with the Mikage, where he's a Shadowkin who will join in with the A1, you're dealing, I'm on a Chimera, Ultra Nightmare, hardest difficulty. With his A1 on my account, I'm dealing 1.3 million damage per hit. That's busted. And then he goes in with Mikage on every other hit. It's insane, right? He's just broken, man. With the leech and the decreased defense as well. So nice to have your main nuker be a decreased defense champion, let alone the leech. Fills the champion's turn meter by 5% every time they attack an enemy under a leech. Sure. 25% more damage against enemies under leech. Yeah, sign me up. And then his alternate form isn't, it's not bad, but you just never use it because you don't want to switch forms to reset the attack. You can use it. A lot of endgame players will use his alternate form just to keep him alive during the ram form of Chimera, but that's really about it. The only other reason you use his alternate form is maybe in wave content in like Centranos or whatever, right? He looks so cool though. Why would you use it in wave content? He has an AoE with the extra turn. Really solid, decreased speed and a leech as well. And then he goes into another AoE with a heal. So a lot of support between the leech and the heal. Doubles the amount of healing this champion receives when attacking enemies under a leech, and decreases the damage taken from enemies under leech debuffs by 50%. And he looks so cool. Might be one of the coolest looking champions, in my opinion, on his alternate form in the game. Really cool. I wish I could see that instead of this all the time. No offense to his base form. It looks pretty cool too, but man, I love that alternate form. All right, so Toshiro. I'll put him right over here, personally. Put him right over here. All right, next up is going to be Embrys. Only 2 left here, guys, and I was like, I could probably bust this video out in 20 minutes. What was I thinking? Embrys the Anomaly. Man, I love this dude. I love this dude. No one has him in the game at the time of this recording. I have not seen gameplay of this dude. I'm not sure if it exists on a test build or whatever. I haven't seen any. So this is pure speculation here. I really love him. I don't think he's as strong as Mythical in the game, but I think he's very compelling. I think a lot of players are going to be very excited to get their hands on him. He's a little bit confusing too. He's doing so much, and he's also the only champion in the game to have this Necrosis debuff as well. Necrosis acts kind of like an HP burn, kind of. They lose 5% of their HP every turn, but you can't remove it, and its duration does, well, you can remove it, but it's very tricky to do so. Its duration never decreases, right? So, to remove a Necrosis debuff, you need to revive allies on your team, and then the Necrosis debuff will get reduced on everybody. The only other way to remove a Necrosis is to put a Stone Skin buff on a champion to decrease the duration. So this is sustainable damage that always happens, and it stacks. So if there's 2, if you kill, how do you get Necrosis? By killing an enemy. Somebody dies on their team, everybody gets protected Necrosis. You can't remove them, you can't do anything to them, right? So you can stack, you kill 2 enemies, you have 2 Necrosis, thus 10% of your HP every turn until you revive somebody. And then only 1 stack falls off. So hopefully that's a good like baseline description of how that works. He has an AoE on this A1 on his base form. Increase the duration of a random debuff on all enemies by 1 turn. Pretty solid. He has a true fear on all enemies for 1 turn, and a decreased attack on all enemies for 2 turns. Can't be resisted if the enemies have any Necrosis, but then he grants an extra turn. Honestly, it's not that great of an ability on a 4-turn cooldown, but the extra turn makes it great, because you can open up with it, and then go into his A3 or switch forms. But why not, right? I mean, Polymorph is the only reason why not. But if you're not going against Polymorph, why not start out with a True Fear or Decreased Attack and an extra turn? And then you can decide if you want to go into the Unmaking, which is very powerful. It's an AoE that removes Stone Skin, replaces them with True Fear. Whoo, that's good. A block debuff will be replaced by block buffs, and then also any positive buff will be replaced by the crappy version of the debuff, or the debuff, I should say. Then steals 5% of each target's turn meter for each buff converted into a debuff by this skill. Also, decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 20%. Can't be resisted if they have any Necrosis stacks. Whoa, this is a nasty ability. We're removing everything, and then we're switching everything. If you go in, and let's just say a Sifi goes, and you have 3 buffs on 4 champions, 16 buffs, and then you get 5 times 16, you're getting like an 80% turn meter fill, right? Really freaking solid, right? And then you're decreasing the turn meters on top of that. This is a really nasty ability, guys. Really strong. Whenever an enemy is killed, place a necrosis stack on all enemies. Okay, great. All right, on his alternate form, he becomes a nuker. And his multipliers are actually really nice. He becomes an HP-based nuker, right? I'm sorry, that was his base form. Switch it over. HP-based nuker, godlike damage rating on his A1, godlike damage rating on his A2. He has a 0.28 HP plus accuracy damage, right? So he ends up hitting like an Eric's or so on his A2. Deals double damage to enemies whose accuracy is lower than this champion's accuracy. Ignores 50% of enemy defense whose accuracy is equal to or higher than this champion's accuracy. Whoo! Man, Atomize. I like the name of the ability too. It's like, I'm gonna turn you into an atom, bro. Stand back. Your life is forfeit. I like this name too. This is another extra turn ability, by the way. So, you know, if you're not going against a bunch of stone skin and buffs, you can open up with a True Fear, the decrease attack, take the extra turn, come into the base, the alternate form, swap HP with an enemy, fully restores this enemy. Each time the skill is used, increases champions ignore defense effects by 10% in their alternate form, says 50%. So even if you do it, and you don't do any, all the enemies are full health, right? Even if you use the ability, you're just going to increase his ignore defense because you're going to get the extra turn anyway. Then you go into his A2. You're going to be ignoring 10% of defense. You're going to be ignoring 60% of their defense if their accuracy is higher than this champion, which actually gives you an incentive not to build him with high accuracy. He can be a ferocious nuker. And then again, he has all the, look at this degenerator passive. Whenever the champion dies, reflex damage equal to 50% of the fatal hit back to the attacker, including any surplus damage. Oh my word. And if that's not enough, if the champion is about to get killed by a fatal hit, preempts the hit, it instantly places a revive on death buff on them for 1 turn before the damage is taken. Ooh, man. This guy's a beast. I really don't know. No one's talking about him. It's because no one has him. But man, he seems so busted to me. He's got it all. I don't know where to put him right now. I'm going to put him right over there. But man, I'm intrigued. I am intrigued by that dude. I'm very excited about him. All right, only one more left, guys. And he is the newest mythical in the game. And that is Fjorad Wolfheart. This guy, man, he looks pretty cool, right? I mean, I think he does at least. But I'm not a big fan of this kit at all. Bummer when they release a bad mythical. Like, no one wants a bad mythical, man. No one wants. They shouldn't exist, right? He has a freeze on his A1. He's a block debuff, increase speed on all allies for 2 turns. Decrease the cooldown of all ally skills except this champion by 1 turn. Not a bad ability, honestly. Not a bad ability. It's kind of like maybe a little bit of a souped up version of Lady of Irith's ability, right? So not bad. Great captain. On the A3, Wolf's Heart Rage. It's an AoE 4-turn cooldown when booked. Now, this is pretty cool because it's an extra turn ability. But he's a freeze on all enemies for 1 turn, decrease speed on all enemies for 2 turns. If the enemy's from Galean pack, plays a freeze for 2 turns, then gives an extra turn. So, if we open up with this move, with this champion, and take an extra turn, by the way, whenever the champion receives a debuff from an enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a freeze debuff on that enemy for 1 turn. The chance is increased by 100% if the target's from the Galean pack. So very good on the pact. So anyway, you open up with the freeze, switch forms, and then he does have a pretty good synergistic ability here. This one, Disciple of Torment. Sounds cool. 3-turn cooldown, attacks 1 enemy, will ignore 50% of the target's defense. If the target's under a freeze, ignore 100% of their defense. If they're killed, blocks the revive. Man, I'm talking smack about him, but I love that synergy. I love opening up with this A3, freezing everybody, maybe for 2 turns, granting the extra turn, coming in, and then block reviving 100% ignore defense. Whew, really good against Force Affinity champions, right? He also has an AoE extra hit on enemies under CC effects. So if you don't have anybody you think you can kill, which you probably will, but if you don't, you can go in there and get an extra hit with an Ice Quake ability, right? It's an HP-based ability. It has decent damage, not insane damage, though. The attack kills an enemy, resists the cooldown of one of this champion's skills randomly. And then we already talked about his A2. Honestly, it's not that bad of a kit, right? It's really nice control. The bummer about his kit is this. Everywhere that you go nowadays, in PvE, you know, he's going to be a wave clear, right? He's not bringing, like, anything essential. Not enough damage for HP-based champion to be used against most bosses, you know? He could be a good support, though, with his A2. So I guess you could use him as a support / control, especially progression-y, you know? So not the worst thing to have on your team. He could fit in, like, a Hydra team or something like that, I guess, right? Not endgame, like, not the best teams, but okay. But in the arena, the big issue is Stone Skin, you know? I mean, the best freeze champions right now, the best stun champions right now, are champions like Odin or Agurgo the Augur, who remove all enemy buffs before placing their debuff. Right now, you know, it sounds good on paper. You open up with a freeze, you come in, you block revival. But, you know, you're going to go in so much Stone Skin, and it's not going to matter, right? Stone Skin, Feral with block debuffs, you know, it's not like it's ignoring. I would rather see this ability, rather than placing it for 2 turns on the Galaean Pact, I would love to see Galaean Pact champions, this ability be able to ignore block debuffs, right? Kind of like Lady Noelle's ability when Sir Nick's on the same team. I would rather see that. Give him more viability, and you could really use them extremely effectively against those packs. So anyway, guys, that's where I'm at right now. That's every mythical, and I gotta rank my man Fjorad. Come on, Ash. I think that's nice control. I'm gonna put him at the top of solid. B tier. So there it is, guys. We're very top heavy on this list, which I'm not super excited about. But now that I'm looking at everybody on this list, I think I can make some, like, small changes. I probably put Gharol a little bit higher, maybe even a lot higher. I think all this feels right. I'm glad that I put Komidus a little bit lower. He's such a beast, but he's more of an arena champion and a bomb type champion. If they ever come up with more bomb content, you'll only get better, right? I know people are going to think Mikage is too high on my list, but whatever. I think that probably some people might have Gizmak. Like, it just, like, these 4... Honestly, all of these champions, like, up to Nice, because Nice could easily be here, I feel like. Maybe it kind of, like, I don't know, whatever. But I feel like all of these right here, they're all God tier. And I really feel like you could just pick the order based on what you need, right? So it's tough to kind of order those or rank those specific, like, 5 champions or 6 champions. But guys, that's going to do it for the list. Hopefully you have enjoyed this. I talked quite at length about every single mythical champion. Let me know how many you have, who you agree with, and who you disagree with in terms of my rankings. Thanks for watching till the end. And as always, take care, guys.